first page that we're going to come to after that um, title page is the first index page. Now, the index is quite large, it's 7 pages long, and depending on which book you're working on, there's always going to be the 7-page index. So we're working on book 1. But if you were to continue your family tree and move into book 2, then you're also going to see this index. The reason that they're broken up into different books is that there's so many ancestors that we can't have a single book that has all of them in there. So book 1 only includes the root person, the root person's parents, and the grandparents. So let's look at what that means. So if we were to zoom in, you can see this index has been filled in so that numbers are assigned to specific direct ancestors. The root person, that is the person who is going to start our family tree book. Basically, you're going to take one person and then you're going to take their family tree and go straight up from that person. So it's going to be that person. And then all of these other people, they're going to relate back to the root person. So the root person is the self, the father is the parent of number 1, the root person, mother is the parent of number 1, and the paternal grandfather is the parent of number 2. See, the paternal grandfather is numbered number 4, father is numbered number 2, but you're always going to be able to trace it all the way back to the root person because this is the parent of number 2, who is the parent of number 1. Now, it's completely up to you how you want to fill this out. Also, know that with this giant index that goes all the way up to the 4th great grandparents of that root person, you're probably not going to know all of the names, and that's fine. You're just going to fill in what you do know. Now, you can choose to add text in any font that you want, but if you'd like it to match, and I find this is also just the easiest way to add font really quickly, go up and grab one of the pieces of text. I'm going to select this name text, and I'm just going to use my keyboard to copy it. I'm going to leave it there, and then I'm going to use my keyboard to paste. And you can see it's added more text. Now, when I move this around, Canva is going to try very hard to help me line up this text. See these little guider lines? This text is now lined up exactly in the middle of these lines. And it's also lined up with the text above it. So that's perfect. And this font matches. Now, again, I could select this and I could pick a different font. Say I wanted to use a handwriting font, and you might want to make it look a little fancy. I would suggest that you use the same fonts throughout. If you decide on a cursive or handwritten font, that's fine, but don't change to a different cursive or handwritten font if you can help it. It just makes the book cleaner and a little easier to read. And I don't know about you, but as much as I love handwritten fonts for the way they look, they can be very hard to read. And the number one thing that you want with this book is you want to convey information about your family tree. So I would actually recommend sticking with a very basic font. Again, you don't have to use this Canva Sans, which is the font that I have chosen to use. But if you were to use that font, then it's going to be consistent. It's going to be very easy to read. So let's go ahead and use that. Now I am going to look at the research that I've done, and I'm going to fill in what I know on each of these lines about these people. Now, the person that I have chosen to do this book on is named James Kennedy Gordon. And I'm actually going to add a little more information in parentheses. I'm going to put that he was born in 1895. You don't have to do that. I found it's kind of helpful, especially with the male ancestors in my family tree, because they tend to have names that repeat. And so sometimes I do need to know which James Gordon I'm talking about. Do I need to know the one from 1895, the one from 1940, the one from 1790? So I like to add that little bit of information, but of course you could just use their names. There's no reason to put in any kind of index number here yourself, because now that this person's on this line, I know that James Kennedy Gordon is going to be index number 1. Okay, so let me use my information. I'm going to fill in the rest of this page. Okay, I'm only going to do this first page because it would just honestly take too long to fill in the rest of the index. Now, a couple questions might have come up. Um, the one obvious one might be, why did I leave blank spaces? I don't know the names of these people yet. I have not found the parents. Here it's the maternal great grandfather who is the parent of number 7. If I go up to number 7, that's Elizabeth Cox, who was born in 1851. I don't know who her parents are. I can tell you because I've done research on Elizabeth that I have guesses, but I have not been able to narrow down exactly which Elizabeth I'm looking at because, unfortunately, where she was born, Elizabeth Cox was a reasonably common name at that time. The other question might just be, okay, you're filling in this index with all these names and this information. Where are you getting it? I have been doing research for a long time. And so I have acquired these names and I have them, I figured out what they are based on documents that I found on sites like Ancestry and Family Search and MyHeritage. So I am pulling these names from my files, from my records. If you are new to all of this, you really may not know almost any of these names. Another word of caution, if you're new to all of this, you might be on Ancestry, clicking around, finding links, and you might tap into a family tree that somebody else has done that is full of generations like this. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm also not saying that you can't copy it all down into your index, but every time you find a family tree that somebody else has put together, you do need to take it with a grain of salt and do your own research to make sure that they haven't connected the wrong Elizabeth Cox, for example, and you've now introduced people to your family tree that aren't actually in your family. So anyway, but that's the basic idea of how to fill in the index. So not necessarily how to get the information for the index, but if you have the information, that's how you fill it in. And again, don't worry about these blank spaces. And like I said, the index goes on and on and on. You have 4 grandparents. See, paternal grandfather, paternal grandmother, maternal grandfather, maternal grandmother. It goes up from there. So 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great grandparents, 16 second great grandparents, 32 third great grandparents, and then 64 fourth great grandparents. So there's quite a few people in this index. Now, at the end of the index, there's some blank space. That is because if we were going to continue this index, this is where the 5th great grandparents would start. And I didn't include the 5th great grandparents in this index. So you can choose to use these numbers for different people who aren't direct ancestors. You can choose to use them or to leave them blank. You could continue and add in the 5th great grandparents if you wanted to. Or maybe you just want to follow like a direct line at this point and just have, one specific 5th and 6th and 7th great grandparent. I know people like to do that sometimes to follow the family name. They sort of follow that surname line. Anyway, but if you don't use these index numbers, it's fine with me. It'd be fine with anybody else. So that is how you fill in this index. Now in this book, in book 1, we are only looking at, let's go all the way back to the beginning, the root person, the 2 parents, and the 4 grandparents. So it's just index numbers 1 through 7. That's what we're going to be working on. So let's move on to how you would fill in those chapters.